Welcome back to the Puckn Pod. On today's episode, we discuss the revolving door of NHL head coaches. We talk about some major injuries in the NHL, including for the teams we support. We discuss our favorite Canadian basketball moments in history. And finally, we discuss our favorite animated CGI family movies. That's all coming up next, right here on the Puckn Pod. Let's Puckn go! Well, ladies and gentlemen, we are back for another episode of the Puckn Pod. My name is Joe.
My name is Brandon.
And I'm Paul.
It's another fun one, gentlemen. We got a lot to talk about. There's so much going on right now in sports. It is almost like there's too much to talk about. Where do we start?
Well, there's been some major happenings in terms of the coaching fronts in the NHL right now. We saw Jim Montgomery get fired, and 5 days later get rehired.
Yeah.
Is that like the shortest span of time ever? I have no idea, but that's got to be some kind of record, honestly.
You know what I'd like to see in the NHL is teams trading coaches. That'd be really cool.
That would be cool, actually. I've thought about that in the past when I was a kid.
Yeah, just like coaching staff or coaches just being traded from one team to another, or like a GM being traded, and having there be some sort of compensation go the other way. That'd be kind of an interesting idea. Maybe we see that in some weird league that they create for fun, where they have like only 3-on-3 and you start seeing these kind of things happen. But yeah, Jim Montgomery fired, and what's interesting about him being fired from the Boston Bruins is that he actually had a winning record with them. Like
a really good winning record.
Yeah. He
had the best regular season in NHL history with the Bruins 2 years ago.
It's crazy.
And 2 years later, he's fired.
Yeah, fired, and then he got rehired again in St. Louis. How do you think Bruin fans are going to kind of react to that?
Well, if you look at, obviously, the start to the season that they've had, I think they probably have high expectations just because, even though it's been a while since they won the Stanley Cup, Montgomery had a winning record the last couple of years, so their expectations have probably been sky high. So the fact that it's not there, it makes sense why they would fire him. You have to wonder how much it's on the players. But if you're looking at the fans, they're probably okay with it, considering the start of the season that they were having.
Boston Bruins fans are savage.
Yeah.
I think it was 3-ish weeks ago when the Leafs played Boston. They played them twice this year. They lost the first game, but the second game they won, it was in Boston. And, I think the score might have been 3-1 Toronto.
Yeah.
It might even have been 2-0. It wasn't any more than a 2-goal spread. And Boston, it was in the third period, and Boston had just come off 2 power plays where basically they got nothing going. The crowd was hardcore booing them. And I don't mean a few. I mean the arena was booing them. And at that time, they kind of went sideways and downhill rapidly after that. But at the time, they did have above 500 record. It's insane. The craziness in Boston.
John Cooper is the longest tenured head coach. He's been coaching the Lightning since 2013.
Yeah.
So right now, when you consider NHL coaches kind of being fired and hired, it is happening a lot. I think I read somewhere that since I'm pretty sure I'm wrong with this statement. It's not this one, but the fact in my mind sticks out is that since Rick Tocchet was hired by Vancouver, there's been 100 coaching changes in the NHL. I don't think it's Rick Tocchet, but it's around that same time. So, in the span of 2 years, we've seen 100 coaching changes in the NHL.
Well, think about it this way for Jim Montgomery in particular. We talk about how he had a good record with the Bruins over 3 seasons, 2 1/4, 2 1/3, whatever. If you combine the losses and overtime losses, the regulation losses and overtime losses, they still almost have double the amount of wins.
Yeah.
120, 41, and 23 was this guy's record.
Yeah, that's a really good record.
And it shows you, right, that is always going to be your first choice because you can't get rid of your roster. We all know that. You can't just start getting rid of guys. You can try, but it's not realistic, especially in the salary cap era.
Poor Drew Bannister, in the process of this, the Blues weren't out to a great start. They were 9-12-1, but Jim Montgomery gets fired. Well, Drew, great being here, but he's better. Bye.
Yeah. We found better plans on Saturday night. Sorry, I have to cancel.
Okay, so I have a list of all of the head coaches in the NHL currently and when they started. So Anaheim Ducks, Greg Cronin started in June 5th, 2023. Joe Sacco for the Boston Bruins just started November 19th, 2024. Lindy Ruff of the Buffalo Sabres, April 22nd, 2024. Then you've got Ryan Huska of the Flames, June 12th, 2023. Rod Brendamore, May 8th, 2018. Okay, so Luke Richardson of the Blackhawks, June 27th, 2022. Jared Bednar of the Avalanche, who has won a cup with them, August 25th, 2016.
If you're going down the list, when you get to like the longest tenured 5, I want to see if I can.
Okay, so Dean Evanson of the Blue Jackets, July 22nd, 2024. Peter DeBoer of the Stars, June 21st, 2022. Derek Lalonde of the Red Wings, June 30th, 2022.
By the way, that might be the next one gone.
Yeah.
A little tidbit.
I've heard rumors. Chris Knobloch of the Oilers just started in 2023, November 12th. Paul Maurice of the Florida Panthers, of course, won last year's Cup, June 22nd, 2022. Jim Hiller of the Kings, February 2nd, 2024. There's so many 2024s in this list.
Yeah,
this is the thing that's crazy to me. John Hines of the Wild, November 27th, 2023. Martin St. Louis of the Canadiens, February 9th, 2022. Andrew Burnett of the Predators, May 31st, 2023. Sheldon Keefe of the Devils, May 23rd, 2024. Patrick Waugh of the Islanders, January 20th, 2024. Peter Laviolette of the Rangers, June 13th, 2023. Travis Green of the Senators, May 7th, 2024. John Tortorella of the Flyers, June 17th, 2022. Mike Sullivan of the Pittsburgh Penguins, December 12th, 2015.
Yeah.
He's probably gone.
I was going to say a couple of things about Mike Sullivan is that the fact that he's probably not going to last too much longer, unfortunately, because he's an amazing hockey coach.
He is,
But on top of that, he had to have been one of the longest tenured, other than John Cooper, for sure. That was going to be one of my suggestions,
So technically, he's been a coach longer than not longer, pardon me, just shy of John Cooper, like a couple of years, really. But Ryan Warsofsky of the San Jose Sharks, June 13th, 2024. Dan Bilesma of the Kraken, May 28th, 2024. Jim Montgomery of the St. Louis Blues, November 24th, 2024. John Cooper of the Lightning, of course, March 25th, 2013. Craig Berube of the Leafs, May 17th, 2024. Andre Tourigny of the Utah Hockey Club, April 18th, 2024. Rick Tocchet of the Canucks, January 22nd, 2023. Bruce Cassidy of the Vegas Golden Knights, June 14th, 2022. Spencer Carberry of the Washington Capitals, May 30th, 2023. And finally, Scott Arniel of the Winnipeg Jets, May 24th, 2024. So of all of these coaches, so that's all 32 coaches, by the way, of all of these coaches, I'm seeing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 coaches in 2024.
Wow. It shows you the lack of patience, hey? There's no time to mess around now.
I saw a really, really, really funny tweet yesterday actually, in somebody saying that, and it wasn't a joke, they were legit wondering this, is maybe all of the teams in the NHL are bad, and that nobody's actually standoutish good amongst everybody else. And then I thought about it. I was like, well, what about the Winnipeg Jets, right, with the start that they've had? And the question he asked then was, sure, they're good now, but are they it? Are they it? Is there a team right now that you look at the NHL and you say, that team is the team to beat right now, when you consider everybody's season that they're having? It's crazy when you think about it. And so, like these coaching changes, a lot of these coaching changes I look at like panic moves, but it's definitely, a fascinating stat.
Well, it just shows the sky high expectations, right? Like, obviously, the game goes just beyond, unfortunately, the players and the coaching. Goes into the owners that have this expectation. If you're not going to win, you're not going to stick around.
Yeah. You
see the same with players, right? If you're not going to buy into the system that's been put in place and the money that they're paying you, that's why you see trade rumors and you see, probably players stepping up in their contracts years because they want that money, obviously. But as soon as they get their money, the next year they seem to kind of dial it down again. And there's a whole revenue and ownership aspect, and just like I said, shows those sky high expectations, and why you're going to see changes like that constantly in the game, any game pretty much.
So when you look at Joe Sacco and the Boston Bruins right now, considering the Montgomery firing, what do we think is going to affect? How do you think this is going to affect the Bruins?
Well, interestingly, the players have come out, majority of the players have come out in some capacity and said, fully admitted that this is on the players, which you get every now and again, but I mean, how could you not with the impact that Montgomery did have on the Bruins, right? And, their leaders, Pasternak, Marchand, they've come right out and said, this is a tragedy, basically. Like, we have lost a good coach, a good friend, a good person, a tremendous ambassador for hockey in Boston. Like, everything screams that this guy was fantastic, except Cam Neely.
It's funny because a similar firing actually just happened in Vancouver. I don't know if you're familiar with it at all, but for the MLS Vancouver Whitecaps, the soccer team, they just let go their head coach, their manager, and it was devastating to the fans of the team because he was a fan favorite. This Vanni Sartini is the name of the head coach, and everyone was devastated that they let him go. Now, when you think of it on a sort of stat side of things, yes, the team was not doing well under him, and it's not necessarily his fault. It's definitely a lot of it's the players too, but yeah, it's kind of a shock to the fans when they think about this guy's reputation in the city and what he brought to the team. And they did win 3 Canadian championships under him, and so it's a big deal. But in the end, it was the right thing to do. What about, so now we look at Joe Sacco, of course. Joe Sacco is the interim head coach. So do we see a future with him as staying as their head coach?
It's one of those things you'll just have to see for the rest of the season, right? Like, Boston's still not moving fast up the standings by any means. So
they lost to Vancouver the other day. It wasn't exactly the players' fault because they really outplayed Vancouver. It was just Kevin Lankinen stood on his head and stopped everything that came his way. So, I'm grateful as a Canuck fan to have Lankinen on my team, but the players in front of him do have to do something. Boston definitely made it an interesting game.
It's funny. I look at the Atlantic Division right now, and to be honest, besides maybe the flip-flop between Panthers and the Leafs, that is exactly how I'd expect to see it. The 4 teams in a playoff spot right now, which are the Leafs, Panthers, Bruins, and Lightning. It's been that way for a couple of years now. And sadly enough, the Canadiens and the Senators at the bottom, and the Sabres and the Red Wings fighting for a spot.
Sacco did come out and he said something that I thought was interesting. I mean, he kind of went on about how excited for the opportunity, and this is an Original Six franchise, and kind of the standard response when
but they have a script somewhere.
Yeah, he came out in that same interview and said, "We want to be harder to play against." That just seems so shocking to have to admit that with how successful the Bruins have been and how hard they are to play against.
Well, yeah, and like the players that they have on their team, you have to think that's what's expected when you play against those guys, right? So for him to be, come into that role, I mean, he was on the team prior to Montgomery being fired, but for him to come into that role and kind of say, like we're not good enough, we're not a difficult team to play against right now, like that's a statement. For sure.
Like Seabass there comes out and absolutely all he does is construct his roster around guys that are a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
And, that whole kick his ass Seabass line from back in the day kind of makes sense. Like, every player on that team, you're just like, man, get away from me.
Yeah.
It's just, they're frustrating when you play them because whether you win or lose, you're like, okay, well, now 19 of my players got to take an ice bath.
Yeah.
I mean, I know the game's hard, but, man, that's
crazy.
Something about that team in particular. Florida's no different.
Yeah.
I watched a game recently, right, against Toronto, and it's like there's no time, no space, no anything. The forecheck is insane, and Boston's been famous for that for years, right? Just nonstop, relentless, and you want your team to be constructed that way. You hate playing teams like that, but I thought that was an interesting tidbit. We want to be harder to play against. What do you mean you want to be harder to play against? Well, piss off.
Considering like Montgomery had a .659 winning percentage, most fired coaches, if they've been tenured a little bit, you're looking at them being around closer to, like, say 500 or
Right.
like a little bit over 500. He won almost 70% of his games.
So what do you
that they
think then
played.
is the I mean, obviously you don't know the answer to this, but what do you think could be the reason for this team's drop off, considering that a lot of the same players are on the team? I mean, they did lose some players, they gained some players too when you consider Zadorov and Lindholm joining the team. But what do you suppose is really the underlying reason for their drop off?
And maybe they were just, sometimes players kind of get to a point with the coach where maybe they're coached too hard, where it's not no problem to have expectations, but it gets to a point where you're drilled with something so much, you're coached a certain way so much that it kind of starts to take you down mentally, and maybe that's the case with them. They did make two major signings with Zadorov and Lindholm in the offseason.
Yeah,
both,
Zadorov, by the way.
Okay, Zadorov, sorry.
Maybe in Russian it's Zadorov.
Zadorov. Two major signs, a lot of money to give to those guys too.
That's right.
And they didn't necessarily have the greatest seasons in Vancouver when they got acquired too.
Or Calgary,
right?
for that matter, yeah.
So obviously you have a bit of a change with the personnel, and it could be just that they're not one to click with what the coach was saying anymore. Maybe he was too hard. I don't know what was going on in the locker room, but you have to imagine there's a mental aspect to the game if you're still looking at pretty much the same roster.
Right.
And I would have thought originally, I would have come flat out and said the reason that the Bruins are probably starting to fade a bit is that they're one of the oldest teams in the NHL.
That too.
Because 50% of the time I actually research a little bit and kind of like to know what I'm talking about.
50% of the time.
Yeah, that's about it. Actually, look, they're not even in the top 10 oldest teams in the NHL right now. Yeah. So I would have thought that would have been the reason. Because I don't know, to me, when I think of Boston, it just seems like they've had the same roster for 10 years.
Yeah.
It just feels that way. Again, probably because how well they do every year, how hard they are to play against generally. I don't know, but yeah.
To be fair, I mean, they have a lot of similar players that they've got. So like Zadorov is a big, strong player, and I mean, really, you consider him an upgrade to like Derek Forbort or whoever they have lost in the interim. But like, yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to, I mean, I look at it as a similar situation to what Vancouver's going through. You consider what Vancouver was last year in terms of a structured team, and this year they seem to have lost that structure, right? Like they don't have that same defensive mentality. And so the games are really frustrating from a fan perspective to watch because I looked at the game against Pittsburgh the day after the Boston game. So they win against Boston in a shutout, and then they go and play Pittsburgh and get 4 goals scored on them in the first period. Now, a lot of that is, Artur Shilovs comes in, hasn't played a game in a while, let in some really soft goals. Not only is it his fault, though, like it comes down to defensive structure in front of them. And they're not, they're letting the high danger shots go through. And, these are the things that, I look at it in terms of a kind of, like I said, like a structured kind of mentality, and it's like they don't have that defensive structure anymore. They're not the same team that they were last year, so they need to find ways to win based on the way they're playing, and I think that's the issue that Boston has too.
I guess one other aspect you could look at too is maybe with Boston, maybe the gig is up, maybe teams have made enough of change to recognize the way that Boston's played. They've made enough of a change to counteract that the gig is up. They're no longer able to play that way to bulldoze people over and win games that way.
Think about it from a divisional standpoint too, and how dominating the top end of the Atlantic Division has been for let's say at least 6 or 7 seasons, right?
Yeah.
So those teams at the bottom, well, might as well just get the monkey off our back and say it. The Habs, right? The Sabres, they've been bad. The Senators, the Senators and Sabres are having an okay... I mean, Senators have been a little bit rougher lately, but they looked good when they came out of the gate.
Yep.
Buffalo's surprising. Detroit, again, they've made a few steps. And for them, it almost seems like it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back.
Yeah.
Or the opposite, 1 step forward, 2 steps back. But it's like things are starting to even out, right? And throughout the league, not just the Atlantic Division. I just know the Atlantic well.
Yeah.
And just to see where those teams have been. But when Boston starts to level out like they seem to be now, and, you see a push from the Sabres who have been trading and drafting for, it seems like, a decade.
It's probably more than that, you know?
So I really, simplistically, that might be it.
Yeah.
They're starting to level off because the rest of the league is catching up. They've been so good for so long. Pittsburgh, they were so good for so long. And it's inevitable, right?
Yeah, and I think too, like another sort of, when you think of a structured sort of mentality, again, I think of, yes, it's a lot of it's defensive, but also offensive too. And I know you guys as Leaf fans understand it this way too. Like when you start a game, you want to dictate the way the game is played. Your team wants to dictate the way the game is played. What Vancouver, and I think of this in my sort of perspective, is that Vancouver, what they do is they sit back and they wait for the other team to make a mistake. When you sit back and you wait for the other team to make a mistake, that tends to be when you make mistakes, and then they can capitalize on those. And so that's, I think something that really hurt Vancouver against Pittsburgh the other night, right? Pittsburgh's one of the worst teams in the league, if not the worst team in the league right now. So you're supposed to win those games, no matter who you have in your team, especially in the position that Vancouver's in this year. But, it seems like they're biting themselves in the foot a little bit too much.
I do not feel bad for Pittsburgh. I'm glad that we don't have Dubas anymore on the Leafs.
It's an interesting scenario, and we chuckle, but it's kind of like a good riddance. See you later.
Yep.
So speaking of Vancouver and Pittsburgh, the other night, as we record this was very recently. Vancouver experienced a bit of a loss, and that is with Filip Hronek. He actually got hurt in the game, right at the end of the game, actually, third period. And it looks, they're calling it an upper body injury, but it looks like it's basically a separated shoulder, so he's going to be out for a while. This is kind of the thing we're starting to see a little bit more of across the league. Some big injuries this year, and it's really hurting some teams too. In Vancouver's sake, I'm not going to say that this is the reason for their issues, because they do have injuries, but it doesn't affect a lot of the defense that they have. Now, it will from now on for the next little while. But, let's look at some of the injuries across the league, starting with a certain player who is trying to achieve a certain goal. That's Alex Ovechkin. Paul, what do you have to say about this guy?
Well, as of a couple of days ago, he was leading the league with 15 goals. He's looking to break the all-time record and goes down to injury for 4 to 6 weeks with a broken leg. That's definitely, he might still be able to get the other 27 that he needs to beat it, but it's going to be a lot tighter, a lot tougher. It
definitely affects the pace, doesn't it?
He's 39 years old. Is 4 to 6 weeks really reasonable?
Yeah.
Is it 4 to 6 weeks before he can skate?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know about that number. I really don't. And I mean, this is the injury that will put him out the longest out of any injury he's had in his career.
That's right.
In a season where he's come out on fire and has a chance to break that record, will break that record, however long it takes now. But I mean, a player who I've hated and loved so many times over the last 20 seasons since he started. Exciting to watch. He plays the game the right way. He plays the game hard, and he never takes a shift off. I still haven't been able to figure out how people can't understand how, hey, Ovechkin's going to be standing there on the power play. Maybe you should cover him.
Yeah, that's not
but
I've said the same thing about
Draisaitl. Oh my God! Don't
I've said the same thing about Draisaitl. Now, for those of you at home who are listening to this and going, "What record are they talking about?" In case you've been living under a rock, Wayne Gretzky has the all-time goal record at 894 goals. And right now, Ovechkin is within 40 goals of beating that record.
Within
right?
27 goals.
Within 27
He's
goals.
sitting at 868.
So he needs 27 goals to tie or to beat it?
It's 27 he needs to surpass.
Okay, so he needs 27 more goals to pass that record. And the pace he was on, not only was he going to pass that, he was going to blow it away just with the way he's been playing. So you think about, how an injury can affect a player. Yes, I agree, with his age and stuff, that's going to really affect how he heals up and everything. But I also know what kind of determination he's coming into this season with, and I'm pretty sure he's going to pass that record based on that.
Guess when his last longest stretch of games was, where he missed games. Just take a guess.
3 years ago.
I'll say 2018-ish before they won their cup.
So go back 15 years.
Wow.
To 2009. He missed 6 games from November 4th to November 14th.
Well, there's his 27 goals right there.
Yeah.
in 6 games.
Really think about that, though, guys.
Yeah.
He's missed the longest streak in 15 years that he's missed is 6 games.
Yeah, that's crazy.
No wonder he's right there to pass, getting ready to pass the record. Like, you need a little bit of luck in your career, right? And don't get me wrong, the guy obviously takes care of himself, and he works. I mean, he plays the game hard, so you better take care of yourself, right?
Yeah.
And to know that, I had no idea that was. That's a crazy stat. That really is. You know, and it actually kind of that makes me feel more sad at the fact that he's had an injury like this now. Like, holy smokes, that's really too bad.
A leg injury like that, a broken leg, that's at his age is going to be a bit harder to come back from. If that had happened 15 years ago, he might be back sooner and be rehabilitated quicker. But it might be a longer process this time around.
You know, I really feel like, Wayne Gretzky's nickname was the Great One, of course. Based on the way Ovechkin has been playing his entire career, I feel like the nickname sticks. The Great Eight, I feel like is a really good nickname for a guy like him, and what he's trying to achieve. It's almost meant to be. You know, it just feels like, with the way these guys are. And the way Ovechkin has been set up in his career, he was a great player. Yes, he's well known for being the one, the guy who scores goals from the same exact spot every game. But also, you consider early on in his career, he scored some beautiful goals and unreal goals, right?
I will never forget the one that he scored on Curtis Joseph, where he's literally falling backwards and swings his stick around and gets it past him and scores.
It was amazing. Incredible. I've never seen a goal like it since.
Never seen anything like that.
And I'm not going to lie to you, I just referenced it, but every time he scores from his office, they talk about Ovi's office. Every time he scores from there, I just go, idiots, he's right there. I can see it coming. How do you know? You're 6 feet away.
Yeah.
It's insane how he manages to get so much on that shot and put it past the goaltender at such a high percentage.
Well, give credit to his conditioning, right? Obviously, he's been able to do what he's been able to do because he conditions himself well.
Let's be real here, Paul. He doesn't move from that spot on the power play, so I don't know if conditioning has anything.
He might, if you watch him, I bet you anything, let's say hypothetically his spot is the very top of the circle, which I know it's not, but let's say it was. He might move to the bottom of the circle and then back up again, just back and forth constantly, just to get the guys to move away from him, right? But, I mean, obviously he's doing something right if he's been able to score the amount of goals he's been able to score. He's had a very incredible career. Do you guys think, just hypothetically speaking, do you feel like if he does surpass this number, does he retire this year?
I think he's still at least got maybe 1, 2. You could have more years, but I'd say 1 or 2 years still left in him.
I think he has 2. I would say 2. The reason I say that is because I think Washington is kind of making a bit of a resurgence, and even without him, their record is still pretty phenomenal right now. Yeah. And if he plays another 1 or 2 seasons, I think he's probably going to want to make a run at another cup.
It's interesting when you think about how well Washington's doing too, considering they barely squeaked in the playoffs last year.
Yeah,
and then they got swept, right? So
yep.
Just an incredible kind of comeback for them in that sense. But I think they really wanted to give Ovi that chance too.
Well, if you look at a player that is comparable and might be able to surpass him, you can look at Austin Matthews. He's on pace to even surpass Ovechkin if he plays the same amount of years.
The tough thing with Matthews, and I think you'll agree, is to stay healthy, right? Yeah. When you compare him to Ovechkin, like you said, he's only missed 6 games before this, right?
That was incredible. The longest stretch. I think he'd missed a few, but not many.
Yeah.
You're right. Matthews up. I mean, this year I think we're going on 9 games now,
and he missed a bunch last year too, didn't he?
No, last year he didn't. I think he might have missed 1 or 2 last year.
Yeah.
The year before was another injury season. Plus he had a suspension. From that cross check. The year before that, and then again, I think the season before that he missed 6 or 7 games. So. He has had probably 3 or 4 stretches where it's been close to 10 games, if not more.
Yeah.
So that is a worry.
Yeah.
Of course it's a worry. But despite that, he still is actually on like a torrid pace.
Yeah.
And I'm not,
I mean, he scored 70 goals last year.
69,
69.
Yeah, Might as well be 70.
He scored 60 goals plus in 2 out of the last 3 seasons. Right?
Yeah.
So
I saw that there was a commercial, I think last season for Sportsnet or something like that, where they were like, somebody had said a comment, like they were interviewing all the players, and a player said something about, let's get 50, and then Matthews comes on and he's like, only 50?
which is interesting because one thing I will say about Austin Matthews is he does seem to be pretty humble.
Yeah.
So
yeah, obviously, I think more than anything that was Sportsnet saying,
of course
you should say this, right? But,
yeah.
But let's talk a little bit more about some of the other injuries we're experiencing, especially when we consider both of our teams. So talking about Matthews, I mean, how long has he been out as we speak? As we record today, how long has he been out?
So he's missed 9 games. So he's been out since November 3rd, since they played the Wild. Surprisingly, the team's been playing fantastic without him, which I don't think a lot of Leaf fans were expecting for them to have the record that they have right now. It's 7-2, and there's still the possibility he might even miss another game, putting him at 10 games at this point.
Is he skating with the team?
Yeah, he's projected to play Saturday, but I think they're gonna weigh their options. It's more about now, I think, his legs and getting back and actually being effective. Like, if you're gonna just be a body in the lineup, even with his talent, you may be better suited to dress somebody who's going to be 100%, especially against Tampa Bay Lightning, who
I was going to say,
be
depends
playing,
on who you're playing,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
So, and I mean, really, Matthews isn't the only injury. There's 7 regulars out of the lineup right now, all at forward, by the way.
Wow.
So it's pretty crazy.
The Leafs are basically icing their half their AHL team,
And yet they're still playing well.
It's encouraging, and it's because of their defense.
Right.
Defense and goaltending, which is something you haven't been able to say for a long time. It's always been, well, it doesn't matter. The Leafs will outscore their opponents. You know, the Oilers will score 5, but the Leafs will score 6. You know,
that's a dangerous way to play
it
hockey.
Absolutely is a dangerous way. That's probably why Sheldon Keefe is no longer the coach, because he played that possession stretch offensive game, right? Where Berube's the opposite. And you can see it in their shot totals each game. They're averaging like 23 shots a game.
Yeah.
Which is super low, right?
Yeah.
It's the lowest they've been in a very long time.
But I think what that shows you, like you said, I think that shows you that they are focusing more on defense than they are offense, which is a good thing, because I compare that to what Vancouver did last year, and they focused a lot on defense than offense, and you saw that in the shot results, right? This year, it seems to me like what Vancouver's doing is that they're trying to kind of balance both, where they try to focus for a period on defense and then kind of lose the offense, and then they focus on offense and then they get scored on. So it's like you really, they're having a hard time figuring that part out. I think more than anything, that's on Talkit than anything. But I will say, like, with the injuries that we're seeing specifically in Vancouver, the big one right now is JT Miller. JT Miller basically took a leave of absence with the team. He's injured. Like, there's a lot of reports right now that he's dealing with a neck injury, which is kind of a serious injury. It's very similar to like what happened to Jack Eichel, right? You remember when he was in Buffalo. I don't know if it's that bad in terms of requiring surgery or anything, but there was a rumor that he was dealing with it at the very beginning of the year. Even it was so bad even that he was struggling to take faceoffs at the beginning of the season. Mm-hmm. So there were specific games where he literally wouldn't take faceoffs, which obviously, you're kind of concerned about as a fan, because you're thinking like, what's going on? Like, what kind of injury are we dealing with here? So if it is in fact that as the reason for him not being with the team, there is no saying how long he could be away from the team. And then, of course, on defense, we just found out that Filip Hronek is gone from the team now because of an injury. And this could be anywhere between 6 weeks and maybe longer, depending on how the severity of it, right? But that's going to hurt the team a lot on defense, because he's basically number 2 defenseman. So Quinn Hughes is obviously already taking a lot of minutes, but he's going to be taking a lot more when he's got to play with like Tyler Myers, right? And to me, that sucks.
Funny enough, when the Canucks acquired Hronek, like, he's a big integral part of the team. I thought they paid too much with the Islanders pick that they sent that way to get him, but he's fit in perfectly with Hughes. He's been the right partner to have. He's got that balance the speed but physicality that allows Hughes to open up and play his style of game, and it's been great for the Canucks. So, yeah, that is a big blow, and it's going to be interesting to see how they adapt while he's out.
Here's how it hurts. Here's how it hurts them even more. Actually, when you think about it, when they picked up Philip Hronek, the idea was that they didn't want to permanently put him on the line with Hughes. They wanted to have him be able to captain his own line, so that you could have a 1-2 punch, right? So first line Hughes and whoever, and then second line Hronek and whoever. Hronek obviously playing the right side. Well, the issue being is that he's not been able to do that, and so because of that, now with him being gone, you're hurt even more, right? So it definitely creates a lot more challenges.
Dakota Joshua has now got a couple games under his belt.
Yep.
What do you think?
Yeah, I like it. He's not quite where he was last year, but he's bringing certain aspects every game. And one thing I noticed specifically against Pittsburgh was he was starting to throw more hits. He was being a bit more physical, which is exactly the player we want him to be, right? The cool thing about Joshua is he was always really good with passing and with scoring. Like if he's in the right spot, playing with Connor Garland, he's able to be in a good position to score at a lot of the times. Last game against Pittsburgh, I saw a lot of hits and I saw some really interesting passes too. So he's getting there. It's going to take a little while for him to get that confidence back, right? But it's all dependent on who he's playing with too. And playing with Connor Garland is exactly where he should be.
By the way, as I had mentioned earlier about the Bruins, how I thought maybe one of the reasons for their decline was because they're an older team. Well, just for the record, the oldest team in the NHL, and they are a 10th of a percentage point behind being 31 years old on average, is the Pittsburgh Penguins.
Yeah. I was going to guess that. There's always a mentality when you go into a game playing a team like Pittsburgh where you're just like, well, it's a guaranteed win. But you have to consider the fact that if your team thinks that same way, typically they lose. And that's, I think, what happened when they played Pittsburgh. They kind of looked past Pittsburgh, and I think that's a problem.
It's funny how much of that balance that you need on a team, right? You can't be too young. You've seen teams that are too young that they don't succeed because they just don't have the experience.
Yeah.
At the same side, you can't be so old that, unfortunately, you got to be able to keep up with these young guys that are able to speed past you. So it's really important that you have that balance. You would look at a team maybe like the Detroit Red Wings, and you would actually expect more from them because they kind of seem to have that balance, yet they can't seem to put it together. So it's an interesting dynamic to look at the league and see how that works both with the age differences and the style of play.
Part of me wonders how much of that is coaching more than anything.
Yeah.
When you consider the coach that they have, like you said, that his days might be numbered for all we know, but there's a chance that Detroit does see a new coach in the future. But they have the players that they could actually do some damage.
So considering the fact that you just talked about age of players, style of play, that sort of thing, there's a player that I'm thinking about on Toronto that is a little on the older side, that came in this season and has revamped his style of play and has now been injured for probably 12 or 13 games, and really upsetting to me, to be honest, because he was fitting in on the second line really, really well and hitting everything in sight, which is out of character for this player. And we were worried about this as Leaf fans, about his injury status coming into the season, and it's rearing its ugly head for us. But what do you feel about the impact of Max Pacioretty being out of the lineup, which appears to be a long-term thing?
It seems like most of the players are buying into the system, and even like I said, without Matthews right now, they're playing well. They're all buying in together. They're all working for each other. Pacioretty was having a great fit with Tavares and Nylander before his injury, for sure. I think he'll fit in just fine when he comes back. But yeah, it is a blow, right? Like, obviously, if we're looking at the way the team is right now with how many call-ups they have, it's showing that, one, you need depth, but two, like how much of an impact the players are out that they'll have in terms of the chemistry and change in the team when they come back.
What other players have we got in Leafland? I mean, I don't know if you can see the entire list on one screen right now, but is there a couple other players that you think their absence is really impacting the team? It's completely screwed around the way the lines were set up. And I mean, There was a player they lost in the last game they played who has, as another player who has really kind of ramped up their play and been given an opportunity in the top 6, and Bobby McMahon. He's now out with a lower body injury for God knows how long. They listed as day-to-day. But is there any other players that you've kind of had an excitement for that they've just kind of now it's kind of gone because they're hurt? But
well, you saw for many years how much the Leafs like clamored for that big power forward, getting a Rick Nash or somebody. Matthew Nyes is going to be a big miss. I still don't know how the hit that White Cloud did on him was considered legal. The motion maybe was, but as soon as he left his feet and hit Nyes in the chin, that didn't seem like that should have been let go the way that it was.
Yeah, I mean, that goes back to what's bugging Brando, right? We talked about that in that episode where it just feels like the NHL and the league are so inconsistent with the way they call things, and it just, these are frustrations I think we're going to have for a really long time until they start getting their crap together.
The funny thing about that is at this point, I don't think I give two shits about the penalty. I really don't. I have my opinions a little bit either way. It's kind of one of those situations where it's really not black and white. The frustrating thing for me about it is that it hurt him and he's now injured and he's been having a fantastic season. He's been the player that this team he's developing into the player that this team has needed for a decade. And then something so questionable like that hit, he's out and who knows when he's coming back.
I totally understand that, and you asked that question about, how does it impact the team when a player's injured? I think about the expectations of a player and having that person not meet those expectations. So I think of on Vancouver, Nils Höglander, where last year he had such an incredible season. He scored something like 24 goals or something like that, and this year he's just done nothing. In fact. So much so as he hurt the team, it feels like when he's on the ice, he's actually doing them more damage than he's doing them good.
And that's not a good spot to be in.
Not at all. And so, we as fans are like, we got to get rid of this player, which is sad because I was there when he was drafted. I was excited for the player. He is an exciting player when he knows what he's supposed to be doing when he's on his game. But there's something going on between the ears that just seems to be hurting him and affecting him, and it's not good when you consider the amount of injuries this team has. They need him to be on his game. And so, yeah, I feel like this is the kind of issue that we're dealing with, is not just injuries, but players who aren't injured and they just seem to be not there, not physically, not mentally there. And, it's frustrating when you're a fan watching your team kind of go through this, and then to have Filip Hronek go down and, and Miller go down, and, Brock Besser went down, and we're lucky to have him back again. But these are the players you need to be at their best, to help win those games. And it's just, it's frustrating, and it's scary and sad at the same time. I look at Vancouver for the rest of these games here until Miller comes back, or until Filip Hronek come back, where I'm just like, I don't know what they're going to do. I can't expect them to do anything now, so it's sad for sure.
I'd say prior to last year, Brandon and I probably felt the exact same way about William Nylander. He has the talent, but at times he just wasn't showing up. But I'd say, obviously his career year that he had last year, and he's been pretty consistent this year. It's nice to see that, and maybe, I don't know, maybe Höglander needs more time, or maybe it is a change of scenery.
Yeah, exactly. Well, boys, we've talked a lot about hockey. Let's move on to some basketball. For those Americans listening to this show, there's a basketball team in Canada, and we actually have probably the most important history when it comes to basketball in Canada, considering a Canadian invented the game, right? Let's talk a little bit, and obviously let's exclude that from our list, but let's talk a little bit about our favorite Canadian basketball history, or basketball moments in history.
I mean, for me, there's a couple of things that stick out. I would say, obviously, the 2019 championship, that the Raptors won was pretty exciting. I watched every game start to finish, which I hadn't done in a long time. And actually, that entire season, I was pretty adamant about watching basketball. The wife hated it because I was either watching basketball or hockey just about every night. But
Basically, you weren't present in your relationship.
it was one of those things where, you know, that big trade for Kawhi and the construction of the roster, a new head coach coming in, it just seemed like it was going to be an exciting season, and it ended up, of course, being that way, right?
Yeah.
When you go in and play a dynasty team like the Golden State Warriors and how they've established themselves, you kind of automatically think, oh crap, here we go. You know, they I wouldn't say they made quick work of the Eastern Conference that year, but I mean, the first round they did against Orlando. Yeah. But you know, the 76ers and the Bucks, it was close, hard fought games, and then you get to the Golden State Warriors, and you're kind of like, oh man, I don't know how this is going to go. Let's flip a coin, right? And to be a part of that, and you know, that game winning shot that Kawhi hit,
that was against the Sixers.
Yeah,
that specific shot, yeah. And actually, I was just gonna say, sorry to interrupt you, but I was just thinking, like, that specific moment. You compare that, as a hockey fan, I compare that to slaying the dragon in round 1 against Chicago for Vancouver. That moment where the ball drops into the basket and everyone's just on Kawhi and just celebrating, right? That moment to me is probably what elevated them to make it to the finals in the end, right? And it's just so kind of historic.
And as far as like an individual team follower, I don't think I had experienced a moment like that, even in my years as a hockey fan. I've seen it internationally with Canada, you know, things like that. Yeah. But as an individual fan of a team, that moment really was. I remember standing upstairs just with my arms up in the air. I didn't say a word. I don't know how I didn't. I just kind of went numb to it. I had goosebumps throughout my body. Yeah. Just like that scene at the end of Breakfast Club. Just, yeah! You know what I mean? And it was that was one of the biggest moments for me. Yeah. How could it not be?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
I agree. No, for sure.
There was a lot of debate about whether Toronto's going to win that series when Durant was coming back. He had been gone most of the playoffs, but was coming back. I think it was mid-series, and the Warriors had actually started to win games with him being back in the lineup. He went down with his Achilles tear, and then it just seemed to switch it right back around again.
It's scary when you think about like what could have been, right? But it was nice to see Toronto come back and take that championship. I remember the moment when they officially had won, and there was a shot of Kyle Lowry where he's just kind of like looking down, kind of to himself, like shaking his fist in celebration. Like, it's that moment, and I feel like that's how every Raptor fan felt. Just that moment of like, it's happening, it's finally here, the championship is ours. So that's definitely an epic Canadian basketball moment. Paul, what about yours, buddy?
If I'm looking at some of the history of the game, you have to look at one of the players that like most influenced it for Canada, and that'd be Steve Nash. I didn't really
local boy.
Yeah,
Island boy.
I didn't know much about him until the Sydney Olympics, when he had played for the team during the Olympics. I knew that he had been on the Dallas Mavericks as one of their young players, but that particular Olympics, he stood out and he put his name on the map. Funny enough, he wasn't actually born in Canada. He had his citizenship in Canada. He's actually South African born.
Is that right? I didn't know that.
He's from South Africa?
South African, born in Johannesburg. I don't know why you went with an Irish accent there, but
yeah.
South Ireland.
But obviously he really put Canada on the map when it came to basketball, at least in terms of this millennium, this century. He had won the MVP of the league for the Phoenix Suns when he had left Dallas to move over to the Phoenix Suns. He won it 2 years in a row, in 2005 and 2006.
That's right.
He kind of got Canada noticed again. You look at another player that kind of helped with Canada getting noticed, and in terms of the Raptors, you have Vince Carter, who kind of put the Raptors on the map. Those two guys were very influential for Canada in terms of inspiring people, some of these young guys getting into the league. You're looking at R.J. Barrett, you're looking at Dylan Brooks, you're looking at You keep looking at players. You look at Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who might even take the MVP this year, considering how often he sinks buckets and he does it with high efficiency. You have to give credit to both. Again, I give credit at least to Steve Nash and Vince Carter for getting the ball rolling and getting Canada noticed and getting these young kids that want to join the league and make a difference.
Yeah, it's crazy when you consider the amount of players that come from Canada that are really good NBA players. Steve Nash definitely paved a way for a lot of these players, and it's really unfortunate he never got to play for the Raptors. He never got to play for Canada in Canada, right?
There was a discussion at the time. I think I can't remember who the GM was at the time. When he was leaving Phoenix, he was looking to decide between the Raptors. He got offered actually a large contract by the Raptors, but decided to go with the Lakers because his family was close by in Phoenix there at the time for that. Another thing with Steve Nash too, because he is known as a Canadian player. He was raised on the island here down in Victoria.
In Victoria, that's right, just down the street from us. A few hours or an hour.
Funny quick story about that. When I was in high school, so I graduated in 2005, I took French all the way up until grade 11. And in grade 11, my French teacher at the time, she was the same age as Steve Nash. She had actually gone to school at UVic at the same time Steve Nash was. They took a lot of courses together because she was a French and a PE teacher. So it was interesting. She had a few little stories about him, but the one thing that she did say was that the person that you see Steve Nash as, the ambassador, the great person he is, that is who he is.
Yeah, I believe that.
Which is incredibly humbling as a Canadian to know that, it's not just lights, cameras, action. Like, this guy is a good person, and that to me is super, super important, especially for a professional athlete, a celebrity, anybody who's in the limelight, right?
Well, you have to look at one of the highlights, not even basketball related. He got to be a torchbearer for the Olympics when they were in Vancouver because of, again, the name that he made for himself, that people knew his name and certainly could relate to sports because of making that name for himself.
Yeah, he's actually a big soccer fan too. He played soccer growing up, and he had ownership of the Vancouver Whitecaps for a while. I don't know if he still does or not, but I know for a period he did. And so, very, very prominent in the soccer game as well.
He played soccer when he was at UVic.
That's right.
For the team there, yeah.
Yep, that's right.
It's interesting because if you think about it, Canada doesn't really have a long history in the NBA, right?
Yeah.
We've only ever had two professional teams in the NBA, and they both, their franchise opening season, their original season was in the same year in 1995, right?
That leads me to my favorite moment, which of course was the Vancouver Grizzlies. They were never a storied franchise, obviously, but it was exciting for me to be able to watch NBA basketball. If it wasn't for the Grizzlies, I would never have been a fan of the NBA. I started watching as a kid because of the Grizzlies, and I fell in love with the game because of the Grizzlies, and so I played basketball growing up, but I didn't pay attention to the NBA really until the Grizzlies came around. So for me, it was the most exciting kind of thing to be able to go to a game and watch players like Michael Jordan and I got to watch the Indiana Pacers play, so I got to see Reggie Miller play.
Oh man.
And they were coached by Larry Bird when I got to see them live, and so it was really exciting to be able to see Larry Bird live and Reggie Miller live and watch the the game. Of course Vancouver got destroyed that game, but to me that didn't matter. It wasn't about watching them win, it was about getting to see kind of history in front of me, right? And so that was the excitement of having an NBA team in Vancouver. They were in the NBA for a total of 6 seasons, so starting in 1995, along with the Raptors. They ended up moving to Memphis in 2001 after that final season. Now, this is where it kind of gets sad. Again, this is more of a depressing thing to remember, but for me, again, remembering the Grizzlies, there's sort of passion behind it. So 1995-96, they ended up finishing 7th worst team in the league. They actually maintained 7th and 6th basically throughout their time in Vancouver every year. So 95-96, they finished 7th. Their record was 82, 15, and 67. So 82 games, 15 wins, 67 losses.
Ouch.
Their win percentage was .183. Definitely not a good win percentage.
Ouch, Charlie.
Now, again, this first season, their attendance was 17,183. That was their average attendance. 96-97, same exact record. They finished 7th in the league. 82 games, they won 14 games, lost 68. .171 win percentage. The attendance went down to 16,571. The following season, 97-98, sixth in the league, sixth worst in the league. 82 games, they won 19, lost 63 with a .232 record. Their average attendance, 16,108. So again, numbers keep going down. The following year, 98-99, their attendance went up. They finished 7th worst in the league again with 50 games, 5-0. I think this was a shortened season due to a lockout. With 8 wins, 42 losses. .160 record with average attendance 16,718.
So here's my question then. Why did that franchise have to move?
Yeah.
It's not like they weren't selling tickets.
Yeah, they were selling tickets.
They were making money.
There's 2 more years. 1990, 2000, 7th overall, 7th worst in the league. 82 games played, 22 wins, 60 losses. So that's actually a decent record considering their previous years. Still a bad record, but .268 win percentage, but the attendance, 13,899.
Okay, so Brandon, shut the hell up.
2000-2001, which was their final season, and at this point we knew that the team was going to be moving. 7th worst in the league, 82 games played, 23 wins, 59 losses. So literally 1 win more than the previous season. .280 win percentage, and finally the attendance, 13,737.
Still in the tens of thousands, though.
Yes, I mean, yes, their fans are still going to games, but it's not good enough. They can't afford to keep the team there based on those numbers, right? It's kind of like if you look at Winnipeg right now, and if Winnipeg is way worse than they are right now, and they're not selling those tickets, that question may be raised one more time.
Oh, they're going back to Arizona.
Exactly.
So
that, it's a scary thought. But, again, that's the negative side of the Vancouver Grizzlies. When I think back about the Vancouver Grizzlies, I don't think about the negatives. I think about the positives and how it made me feel as a kid. Yeah. I would be on the basketball court playing basketball all by myself, just imagining myself playing for the Grizzlies.
Mike Bibby!
Exactly. It was an exciting time. It was an exciting time. And so that's when I think of my favorite kind of memory of Canadian basketball. For me, it's the Grizzlies, it's the Raptors, it's having NBA in Canada. And I think we should all be proud of the fact that we have a team in Canada that's in the NBA, but I really wish Vancouver had a team.
Yeah. I think when I think back to the Grizzlies, I think of their first ever pick, and that was Big Country.
Bryant Reeves.
It's
funny because there was a documentary. There's actually a couple of documentaries by the same director, but she's from Vancouver. Grew up a Grizzlies fan, and she made these incredible documentaries. One is called Finding Big Country, and she literally was trying to find where he was so he could tell his side of the story, right? And it's actually a really incredible documentary. If you got a chance to check it out, it's really cool. And there's another one that they did about Vancouver, about the Grizzlies themselves and the history and why they moved and getting the kind of Vancouver Grizzly fan perspective of things and also getting a perspective from the GM and the people who worked for the team and then players who played for the team as well about the team moving. So get a chance to see those. They're really good documentaries and again it just brings back those memories of having that team in Vancouver.
Maybe if another team needs to get moved again, maybe there's the opportunity that it could come back to Vancouver at some point.
I know that there has been talks of expansion in the NBA recently. And Vancouver's on the list of teams that are cities that could get a team again, but I think it's not the front runner at the moment. From what I kind of understand,
Seattle. I know Seattle.
Well, Seattle's like number 2, but there's another. It might be Atlanta. I can't remember. There's another city somewhere.
Atlanta already has the Hawks.
Okay, so there's a city that doesn't have a team, but it's a major city in the United States. For the life of me, I can't remember. But Yeah, and Seattle's up there. I know Vancouver is definitely on the list. Like, the NBA wants to return to Vancouver, and I think there is an appetite for the NBA in Vancouver, so it would be really awesome to be able to see that again. Las Vegas might be the one I'm thinking of, actually.
Could be. I think if you're looking at Vancouver's case, just based upon the attendance and that it was an expansion team before, they might be better. If there is a team that's moving to them, it would be better because at least it's got an established presence with the players that are already on there compared to starting a brand new franchise.
I think too you have to consider a lot of the differences between back then and now.
Yeah.
When Vancouver and Toronto came into the league, there was actually a rule within the NBA where the expansion team could not have a first round pick or a first overall pick, pardon me. So you couldn't have like a top player on your team even if you were bad. So for Vancouver, they couldn't have a first overall pick even though they might have been the worst in the league or whatever, for I think something like 6 years or 7 years. So it goes to show, Vancouver's not going to improve over that period. You're basically setting up the teams to fail from the get-go.
100%.
And I learned that from that documentary, specifically telling you about that documentary. So it's definitely kind of informative when you think about, what they went through and the kind of hurdles they had to get over. I'm hoping that if Vancouver gets a team again, that they don't have those same rules for them.
I find it tragic in a way, but through their 6 seasons, you can understand why this stat is there. Yeah. But through their 6 seasons, they had 5 different head coaches.
Yeah.
In 6 seasons.
Crazy.
It's unheard of, right?
Well, I think it goes to show it wasn't coaching that was the issue, right? I think more than anything, the players. The other part of it, too, you consider NBA players not wanting to play in Canada. Especially in Vancouver where it's rainy and stuff. Like there was a lot of kind of hesitancy to be able to or to want to sign in Vancouver. So, you're set up to fail. But, I think those times have changed, especially now that, that Toronto will sometimes play exhibition games in Vancouver. And I think other teams do too. I don't think it's just Toronto, but so the NBA players do get a chance to see what the city's like. And especially in the summertime, it's beautiful.
Quick little tidbit about being bad and Toronto. Just so you know, like right now, the Raptors are the 5th worst team in the league. Their winning percentage right now, and we are 25% of the way through the season now, is .263.
Yeah.
5-14 right now.
So, when you look at the Raptors, I mean, I personally, I see them going through kind of a rebuild process right now. Especially after winning the championship in 2019, they had a couple good seasons where it's like, okay, they were a decent team. There was expectations from them to do better than they did. Obviously, that didn't work out, but they're kind of on the downswing right now. I feel like, and then in the next couple of years, we'll probably see them start coming back up again. But
pretty large fall from grace considering 6 years ago they were a championship team.
Agreed.
I would say right now we might be in like the year and a half or second year even of their rebuild. They had a chance to draft pretty well in the offseason. I mean, we'll see how it pays off or how quickly it progresses. I find in basketball it's a little bit more of a sped up process than say hockey would be.
Yeah, the players they draft don't tend to get to cook in say a farm league.
Yeah, they don't
whatever.
need to, right? Yeah. I mean, if you get a top 10, top 15 player in the NBA draft, that player is going to be a star for you on your team pretty much now.
Right away.
Right? Yeah. It means most of the time. There's always exceptions, but
yeah.
That's I think even in Toronto, they're a little shocked at where they are right now. Hopefully they can kind of turn things around a little bit.
Yeah.
But I mean, they expect it to not be great, but I don't think they expect it to be this poor, with a quarter of the season done. So
totally.
Well, there was a lot made about the trades that they made last year in regards to getting Barrett and getting Quickly. That they thought that it was thought to be a really good trade, and it technically has been a good trade, but obviously there's still more work to do.
So, all this talk about basketball and exciting, history of basketball. Michael Jordan, of course, one of the best players in the NBA in history, the GOAT, as they would say. He was a movie star for a short period of time, a little movie called Space Jam. And that brings me to our next topic, and that, of course, is our favorite animated/CGI family movies. We're going to give you guys our top 3. Gentlemen, what do you guys think? Paul, let's start with you.
Yeah, so when I'm looking back at family films, I'm obviously looking at my youth, and I'm looking at my kids' youth, and certainly experiences I had growing up. And one of the films I probably would have chosen if I was, say, 5 years old would have been Peter Pan, but I'm not 5 years old anymore.
So you're picking this as a 40-year-old man. Okay.
Picking this as a 41-year-old and fondest memories when it comes to family movies. And so my pick was the 1988 classic, The Land Before Time.
Very good. Yeah, I was going to pick that one as well. Emotional film.
Very emotional film. And it was, you look at some of the older family films, and they had a bit of, I don't want to say it was dark to them, but it had almost some mature themes in it. Like, as a kid, you're not fully going to understand that you're watching dinosaurs, and you're watching Littlefoot, and you're watching Sarah and Ducky and Spike and Petrie, all these different dinosaurs getting along, trying to get to the Great Valley in this movie. Made me fall in love with dinosaurs, and certainly I can say the same about my son right now. He's fallen in love with dinosaurs. He hasn't seen this movie yet. We're going to put that on the docket for him to watch soon. But I just have fond memories of this. Not the 20 other films they did after this one, but
yeah. Sing along. And you know what was funny is my grandmother had all 20 of those movies on VHS.
But yeah, like just great history. They had Pat Hingle do the narration for the movie, and he'd been known for doing narrating for quite a few other films, especially with the Muppets. So perfect choice for a good family film to sit down and watch together. And just even the animation was so much fun to watch. You could tell that they put the detail not so much into every little thing that you see in terms of like cells and hairs and stuff like that on the dinosaurs, but in regards to making it interesting to watch. It wasn't just your typical bright colors. It had a bit of a darkness theme to it, and it was one I'll never forget.
It's funny because you think about the science behind animation, especially going back to the 80s, where literally everything was hand drawn, and just a simple sketch that turns into a movie, that turns into something that is something you remember forever. It's so fascinating how human beings perceive things, and like that movie in particular, I agree. Like, I think to my childhood watching that movie, and it just hits you in a specific way where, yeah, you can relate to what the characters are going through, even though they're literally just drawings.
Well, there's one line from that movie I still even use today, and it's when Ducky goes, "Yep, yep, yep."
Yep, yep, yep. All right, Brando, it's your turn.
So before I give you my number 3, I just want to say, because we're talking about kind of like throwback family classics, we watched one last week that I really can't believe we watched. It was definitely not as good as I remember seeing it as a kid, and that's A Troll in Central Park.
Okay, I don't think I know that one.
It's kind of a B animated movie, I would say, from back in the day. The soundtrack on it is terrible. But the idea of it was kind of cool, and essentially it was, a troll from, I can't remember the name, but say Troll Land, whatever, gets outcasted because he has a green thumb rather than like a red thumb, which is meant for bad. Right. And they send him to a place where there isn't any flowers, there isn't any green, and they send him to New York City because it's a concrete jungle, right?
Right.
Well, he ends up, landing in Central Park, which is very green, and he's like, how is this punishment? This is the best place ever, kind of thing, right? Anyway, it was a cute movie, but the rewatch will probably be the last rewatch. Yeah. So my number 3 is actually kind of surrounded by soundtrack. It's one of the reasons I like it so much. I think it's probably the best out of kind of that 90s dynasty of animated movies.
Vibe,
yeah. And I'll go with Beauty and the Beast.
Very cool.
Just kind of a very cool movie. I just happened to look up the actress that played Belle is now 68 years old.
Holy cow.
Wow. Isn't that something?
Wow.
I never really would have... so that means she would have been 32 when she was Belle, I guess. Just in
her 30s.
Yeah. Just crazy. But I mean, as far as success goes, it's one of the most successful animated films ever. Like, I think the budget was around $25 million.
Wow, yeah.
And it's grossed over the years like over $400 million. Kind of thing, right? And it's just one of those classic films that just has that love story and magic and evil and good and comedy, and you have all these eccentric characters that are involved with the castle, and it just kind of gives you, as a child and having an imagination, it gives you everything you need all in kind of one movie, right? And for me, you can't get much better than Beauty and the Beast.
Very cool. Yeah, I agree. I think back to that era of movies, specifically animated movies, and Beauty and the Beast. I think of the Little Mermaid. Those type of movies. Very, very effective. In terms of what the messages that they were trying to get across. My number 3, though, actually is kind of a CGI movie, and that is Up. From Disney and Pixar, and this movie, I think of like the way we talked in the past about TV series that catch you from the get-go, and this movie is one of those movies that catch you from the get-go. The very beginning of the movie where a very emotional thing happens, and it makes you feel that emotion right away, because they do such a good job at building up these characters and showing you their history and their past right away in the movie, so you understand who the old man is and why he is the way he is, pretty much right away at the beginning of the movie. So you kind of go through this roller coaster of emotions from the get-go, and it's a very funny movie. It's unique in the story. Kind of hard to obviously relate to it, because obviously you never tried to tie up your house to a bunch of balloons and float away, unless you have. I don't know, maybe you have.
Last weekend.
Yeah, exactly. But you didn't do a very good job because your house is still here. We happen to be recording in your house. But yeah, it's for me, it's one of those movies where I think of the comedy that's included with it and the sadness that's included with it and just everything. Disney Pixar does a really good job at making you feel what you're supposed to feel, and they make you, they kind of guide you along with the emotion, and so yeah, it's a really, really fun, exciting movie, and it's got an 8.3 on IMDb and a 98% on Rotten Tomatoes. So I mean, when you think of those type of ratings, the Rotten Tomatoes one is the one that kind of catches my eye the most. 98% is like, that's a really good movie, in that specific rating. So, yeah. So Up is my number 3.
It's, when I think of Pixar films, I think of the two Johns. You think of John Lasseter, who's obviously the head of Pixar, and then you think of John Ratzenberger, who's been in almost every single Pixar film you can think of. Yeah. It has to be in your top 3, right?
Yeah,
when it comes to Pixar films.
Absolutely. What's your number 2, Paul?
My number 2, it's still an animated feature. I will allude, at least my number 1 is a Pixar film, but we'll get to that in a minute. So I think of my number 2. When I think of it, I would have been about 10 years old, turning 11.
Math, yeah.
When this movie came out.
I was about 12, so that makes sense.
Yep. Jeremy Irons was captivating in the movie. Same with James Earl Jones. If you guys haven't figured it out yet, I'm talking about The Lion King.
Yeah.
Again, whatever reason it is with some of these bit of dark themes in these movies, still a family film, still engage in the music in the movie. You'll never forget more than half of these songs that are in that film. But again, you're looking at, without giving any spoilers away, there are some things that are happening between the families that causes Simba to run away and discover himself away from his pride and his family. Simba being the young cub to the lions, obviously being the Lion King.
Yeah.
So again, looking at some of the actors, Jonathan Taylor Thomas obviously been well known for Home Improvement, and obviously made one of his major debuts in terms of a big motion picture with The Lion King. He perfectly suited Simba very well, and then obviously the adult version. The adult version of Matthew Broderick. I didn't know much about Matthew Broderick, and I remember as a kid I didn't like his voice for Simba. Since I've watched the movie as an adult, he actually, I find, suits the role really well, especially with his camaraderie with Timon and Pumbaa, and even his girlfriend, later wife, Nala, in the movie. I can't say enough about that movie. It's intense, it's fun, it's funny, it's sad, it's got the full package, I guess you could say. Tim Rice doing the music for that movie. I remember playing a lot of those songs on piano when I was a kid too, and I what can I say? It's my number 2 for a lot of those reasons I just mentioned.
I have a theory behind the actors that they chose for these specific voices, and I'll start with Matthew Broderick, in that I think they chose his voice because he doesn't have kind of a deepness to his voice naturally, and so it creates this sort of easy transition between Jonathan Taylor Thomas and him, so it doesn't sound, so it still has that sort of timidness to his voice.
Yeah.
So he still comes across as, not quite his father, right?
Yeah, as brooding as
Where you get the James Earl Jones, who's almost a stark contrast in terms of the depth of his voice, and then Jeremy Irons, like that sinister sound in his voice, like he plays that role so good. It's like when I hear it, I think of it now, and it's just like, yeah, that's perfect for Scar, right? And then Simone and Pumbaa, just hilarious with Nathan Lane, and then also
Ernie Sabella.
No,
as Pumbaa. Yep.
Okay, who am I thinking of? When I think Nathan Lane, I think Billy Crystal, because their voices are very close together.
Totally.
But yeah, you're right, Nathan Lane. And Nathan Lane is perfect for this role, too, because of the energy that he brings to that character. But yeah, Simone and Pumbaa, the hilarious comedy characters, right? And just like the movie has a really, really good ensemble cast because of the people they have. Okay, Brando, what's your number 2?
Yeah, so this one came out the same year as my last pick, and this movie was the first fully computer animated feature film. And I'll give you guys listening a quick second to think about it. Okay, Toy Story.
Yeah.
Tim Allen, Tom Hanks. You can't really get much better than those guys as far as comedy goes, especially in the mid-90s.
Yeah.
And as you said, Paul, John Ratzenberger, again. Surprise.
Yeah.
Just a cool movie, completely different, right? Something that we as movie fans had never seen before, and just so well done. The story behind it, the execution, just being involved with the characters, relating to the characters. Yeah. Again, lots of good songs in that. I mean, that's what I think of when I think animated movies, right? I think of songs, and again, just memories, right? Growing up in that time. I mean, that I would have been 8 when that movie came out. So I it's just an important, crucial time in my life, and that's really all I got to say about Toy Story. It's just fantastic.
Yeah, when I think of the way Pixar, and back then it was just Pixar, but when in Disney and Pixar now, the way they develop characters and they develop storyline, like you are hooked with these characters from the get-go. You, like I said, with your description before, like you kind of you get so emotionally connected to these characters that whenever something negative happens to them, like you do feel sad for them, and this is they're not just animated characters, but they're animated toys. They're not supposed to have feelings, but but you still feel feelings for them, right? And they do such a good job at making you feel that way.
When you look at the success, right? Like Toy Story's had 3 sequels since, because it's just left that much of an imprint. Yeah,
3 or 4.
They're up to Toy Story 4, yeah.
Oh, 3 sequels, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Me do math well.
Are you sure?
No, yeah, for sure. They're doing something right.
Yeah, and I think I love about Pixar too is that it's relatable for not even just as kids. You can watch it as an adult, enjoy it too. Like they do put subtle, like kind of adult jokes sometimes in the movies. I can remember in Toy Story 2 where they're in the airport and they're going through like all the escalators where the suitcases are, and the toys accidentally open up a camera box, and Ham, who's voiced by John Ratzenberger, is like, "Oh, nice flash."
So like little subtle adult jokes, right? And that actually is a perfect segue for me, because my number 2 choice is Shrek. It's actually all of the Shrek movies, but specifically the Shrek series. The reason why I love them so much is because of the adult jokes that they have in them. There's a specific scene, and I still laugh thinking about it. I think it's Shrek 2, where they're getting arrested, and instead of pepper spray, they have ground pepper that they're putting into their eyes.
I remember that.
It still makes me laugh, because like it's so funny, that scene, right? Like he's in the back of a paddy wagon, and he's grinding pepper into his eyes. Oh God, just little subtle things like that, and it does such a good job at like telling those jokes, and you know you do fall for the characters, you know, and you follow along, and you're on the edge of your seat, kind of like what happens next with these characters, right? So yeah, for me, the Shrek series is one of my favorites. I could watch it again and again and again.
Yeah, that film's got many layers like onions and parfaits.
It's one of those quotable movies that, you know, has and will span generations. Totally. I mean, I don't know how many times a month I say to the guys at work, "Get it right," you know, just and it's a little Scottish accent, and of course, you know, a couple of the main characters, big Canadian guy and Mike Myers,
yeah,
and you know, Eddie Murphy,
Eddie Murphy is one of my favorites. You know, growing up, I fell in love with, which is hilarious because Eddie Murphy movies are very adult movies, but my parents didn't care. Like I watched a lot of Eddie Murphy movies growing up, and we could do a podcast on Eddie Murphy movies, but totally. What I think we should probably do at some point is a podcast on Canadian actors' movies, Canadian actors and their movies. I feel like we could do probably 3 or 4 different Mike Myers movies, and you know, there's a lot of other options out there too, so that's maybe something we should think about for another episode. But Paul, let's get to your number 1.
So, as I mentioned earlier, I was alluding to the fact that this is going to be a Pixar film. This movie, when I first saw it, I actually cried in the theater watching it because it just, I don't know what it was. It was, to me, it was an emotional film. It kind of reminded me of other films I had seen when I was younger. I'll get to that in a second. The main character wasn't one that spoke with words. He made sounds, and the movie is WALL-E.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know what else I could say about this film. WALL-E kind of reminded me of Johnny Five from Short Circuit.
Yeah.
In regards to the look and even kind of the mannerisms and stuff. And that's probably where part of my allure to him was so intriguing.
Well, he kind of looked like Johnny Five in a little ways, like the same eyes and things like that, right? But
exactly. So it had brought some of the memories up that way, but it was almost like the little engine that could, right? You know, he wanted love so bad. He had been alone for centuries, basically at this point, and you know, when he meets Eve, his whole world gets flipped upside down. And yeah, just his growth throughout the film, and you know that he saves the day at certain parts of the film too. I absolutely love this film, and one thing I really liked about it, we talked about John Ratzenberger. This is one of actually his bigger roles was in this film too. Funny enough, his name was John in the film, but yeah, I can't not pick a Pixar film for my top film, and yeah, that'd be this one. You
know, when I think of that movie specifically, I think of the sort of human perspective of the movie too. Yeah. In that, you know, not to give too much away in the movie, but obviously, you know, the planet is without human beings because of the damage we've done to it, right? And the point of WALL-E is to clean up that damage. And you think about it, and it's like, geez, you know, that is very telling of what, you know, human beings are capable of, and the kind of route that we might be heading down if we keep doing what we're doing, right? So it's hard not to sort of get emotional thinking about the sort of reality that movie kind of adds to as well.
Well, and you have to kind of look at the other aspect too. We're looking at AI making a big change in our lives now. Like it was already kind of introduced in the 90s, and it's been growing over the last couple of decades here. But you know, one of the premise behind the movie was the fact that, you know, WALL-E had created a bit of personality of being on his own and collecting all these things. And again, as I mentioned, searching for love. You know, we're seeing AI already being able to interact with humans without it being like so blocky or scripted. Yeah. It actually there's a almost connection happening there, and that's kind of what this film brought forward too, I thought.
Yeah, we've come from 0 to 100 basically with AI in the span of a year, right? It's crazy.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't really have much to touch on the film. I think I've only seen it once, and I really only saw it for the first time about 5 years ago. It was a good movie. I really liked it. I don't think I have the connection maybe that you do with this film in particular because I saw it so late.
Yeah.
But I don't have a negative thing either. It was a really cute movie, really cool to see. A little bit different because it's like 800 years in the future.
Yeah.
And like you say, there isn't even any dialogue from the main character, right? So kind of cool to see how he goes about life, being isolated and and yeah, just
there's a certain innocence to it, right? Like when you consider like the fact that he's a machine that doesn't really have a conscience, but he almost does have a conscience, and that's kind of where it's like a baby learning new things as every day, right? And you can relate to that in a lot of ways.
One of the jokes I loved in that film, we see with the way food and stuff is nowadays with obesity and stuff like that. One of the jokes I loved in the film was that they're talking about a lot of the humans being larger and it being bone loss related instead of the obesity.
Yeah. All right, Brando, what is your number one?
So I'm going back a couple of years before 95 to 1992. Probably one of the most popular and famous animated movies ever. A lot of it, for me, the reason I like it, the soundtrack is obviously a contributing factor. Lots of cool songs. It's neat nowadays as there's been a bit of a trend to start doing live action movies of these animated favorites that we all grew up with. And this movie for me is surrounded by, like I said, wonderful music, wonderful comedy, some really good actors voicing the characters, and magic. I've always kind of been huge into magic as far as entertainment goes, like movies right. and whatnot over the years, TV shows. And the movie I'm referring to is Aladdin.
Oh, yeah.
From 92.
Yeah. Robin Williams. Oh.
Yeah, just classic.
Rest in peace.
Probably one of his most iconic roles, I would say. It'd be pretty
that and Mrs. Doubtfire, probably.
Yeah, it'd be pretty hard to argue otherwise. I actually believe that movie was the highest grossing movie in 1992, and it was an animated movie.
I believe it might have even won an Oscar, if I remember correctly. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it did.
And it wasn't surpassed as the highest grossing animated movie until The Lion King came out.
Wow.
Believe it or not, yeah. So
crazy.
Obviously, just if you haven't seen Aladdin, it's basically a poor boy who gets stranded and finds a magic lamp and basically tries to use the magic of this lamp to find the love of his life and be something that he's not.
Have a better life.
And just everything surrounding it, the feelings, the emotions, like you say, it's just one of those things that always hit home. And I just can't get Robin Williams out of my head now. Yeah. I want to go watch this movie after.
Yeah. I think a lot about when, thinking about Robin Williams is like, I was so devastated when he passed away. It was, he was my favorite comedic actor probably ever. When you consider everything he's ever been in and the amount of energy that he brought to every single character he played. It was even his dramatic roles. Like, he was such a presence in everything he did that it's just like, it was so devastating when he was gone.
One of my favorite films by him, still to this day, is The World According to Garp.
Yeah.
Dramatic film. I know Brand's never heard of it. Highly recommend watching it. It is a very, very strong film for Robin Williams. He'd already been known for Mork and Mindy. I'd say that film really started to get him noticed for films.
Well, we're on the home stretch now, Joe. Just I'd love to hear about your number one. I've been excited about this segment for us because normally we kind of have an idea, I think, of where we're probably going to be in our top picks. But this one, I've had no idea.
Yeah, honestly, I don't know if you guys are even going to see this one coming because it's not a Disney movie. It's not a DreamWorks movie or anything like. It's actually a Sony movie, and it's pretty recent, 2018. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Nice. I think about, when I saw this movie in the theater and the visuals that come with it. When you're looking at it on a big screen and and it's a wide screen and you've got this image of Spider-Man, the camera's directly behind him, kind of like in the video games, the camera's directly behind him as he leaps out of his window and the camera follows him as he falls straight down towards the ground. And you've got New York City coming at you and then all of a sudden you're falling down with them. It's just that epic visual that you get from that film, and again, I know it's just computer animated or hand drawn or whatever, but it does make you feel something. And for me, I think of that immediately when I think of animated movies. The storyline is incredible when you consider everything that Marvel and everything is doing with multiverses and things like that. But this movie kind of brings it to the forefront, and they do such a good job with the way they develop all the different characters. And you've got multiple different versions of Spider-Man, multiple different versions of Peter Parker, and then you also get Miles Morales, which is what the main character is, and you kind of have to understand why everything is happening the way it is, and how do they solve this problem of multiverse, right? And so it's just such a fun movie, and it's action packed, and it's just like, it's Spider-Man, in the end. So how could it go wrong, really? It goes back to 2018, but so it's not that long ago, but it's one of my favorites for sure.
Yeah, you had to wonder when they're going to start incorporating Miles Morales into, obviously, the MCU. This technically is considered canon to the MCU in regards to, if you guys don't know what canon means, basically, even though it's considered somewhat of a separate story, it actually can interrelate to the current movies that are out there. And there is talk about Miles Morales obviously being brought into it, and to get your first kind of look at him in these films, I quite enjoyed these films too for the same reasons.
Absolutely, yeah. Have you seen it at all?
I haven't seen that one.
Oh, you should give it a shot for sure. It's good. It's really good. It's different. It's not like the Marvel movies. It's not like the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man or Tom Holland Spider-Man or any of those. It's just like a separate story. You kind of go, what the hell? If you don't follow the comics, which I don't read the comics. I didn't know who Miles Morales was, so I didn't know what I was expecting, right? Going into this, it was exciting to kind of understand that there is a different version of Spider-Man, and that he's not trying to save MJ. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like a whole different thing. So it's fun to kind of get a different perspective on the character. So yeah, I think all of these choices are really good choices for movies, and we talk about the Disney Pixar thing and how they bring it every time they bring a new movie out, and we talk about the old school Disney movies with the Lion King and with Beauty and the Beast and those type of movies, and Aladdin. They're all really incredible storylines, and so it just goes to show, like, as long as a film is brought together with a good story, I feel like anything can hook you, as long as it's got a good story behind it.
I think that we could probably have a top 10 in this category, and the three of us may only have a few that match.
Yeah.
Like, it's just such a vast collection to choose from, and there's been so many good films over the years. And, I kind of got away from the animated stuff as a young adult, but I've sort of kind of rekindled that a little bit over the last, say, decade.
Yeah.
And opened myself to having a bit more of an influence from some of the newer animated films that have been coming out, and some of them are really, really incredible, underrated, to be honest.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. Well, gentlemen, I don't know about you, but I'm spent. all this discussion talking about both hockey and movies. We could go on forever talking about movies, and I mean, we all have different perspectives on everything, and I'm sure we will in a future podcast. But I think it's time to wrap things up. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. I know I did.
Absolutely. Always a joy.
Always a joy, yeah. Lots of different stuff that we get to talk about every week. Centered around the same ideas, but always something new to talk about, which is great.
And like we say, on every episode, if you guys listening have anything you want to add, you want to discuss with us, maybe you want us to discuss a different topic in a future episode, let us know. You can reach out to us through our Twitter, or X, if you will. We're on TikTok, we're on Facebook, we're on YouTube, we are on Instagram, lots of different mediums to reach us, and of course they're all at the Puckn Pod, so make sure you reach out to us. And of course you can listen to us on all sorts of different podcast mediums, including Spotify. Are we on Seeker? I'm pretty sure we are on Seeker, because that's the other one where you can get all your different podcasts. Check us out on there as well, and make sure you leave a little comment on one of our comment sections and let us know how you guys like the show, or if you want us to discuss anything in the future. Once again, for the Puckn Pod, my name is Joe.
My name is Brandon.
And I'm Paul.
We'll see you in the next one.